Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here with this week's episode of Poetry, Prayer, and Practices. And as you know, it is really important to me to highlight poets. And also, some weeks we really focus on prayer, but all of it as spiritual practice. And if you're like me, you like to be able to get behind the curtain of what's going on in the minds and the hearts of people who write poetry. So this week, as you can see, I am visiting with PAUL SENN. And Paul and I met by being in what you might think of as a mastermind. And if you've been watching the show, then you already know about Poetry Chapel and the process that we went through with a dozen other people to really dive into our poetry. So, Paul, thanks for being with me today and hanging out on Poetry, Prayer, and Practice.
I love this, Tracy. I'm really lucky you invited me in today. So very happy.
Well, interestingly enough, and some people have heard this, but I also know that today we have some first-time visitors. Going through the Poetry Chapel process and then writing or producing together the book, Bouquet of Stars, is what motivated and inspired me to actually do this show. So I knew that if I wanted to carve out more time to engage in poetry, to write poetry, to incorporate poetry as a part of my own spiritual practice, that I needed to do something more formal. And the idea of a weekly show where I could talk to poets and share prayer and talk to spiritually grounded people about their own spiritual practice, that would force me to do what I want to do.
That makes so much sense to me because it reminds me of that thing in nursing. Can I interject on this moment, or is that okay? Yeah. Thank you again for giving me this chance to talk to you. But it's that see one, do one, teach one thing, because you never really learn something until you try to show it to someone else. And I get it. So, and this is what even talking to you today is for me too. So thank you.
So everybody, you've gotten a little bit of an introduction into Paul just by us talking, but I want to share a small bit of a more formal introduction. So let me tell you a little bit about this amazing human being. So as Paul writes in his own bio in the book, Bouquet of Stars, I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, a college town neighboring Chicago. The mix of Midwest U.S. culture and the influx of college students and professors from all over the world mirrored my internal life. My parents were also interesting contradictions. My professor father, the son of a Wisconsin home builder, loved the forest, camping, and fishing as much as teaching economics. I myself became a mix, never quite comfortable in one groove. Football, lacrosse, math and science by day, guitar, and consciousness explorations by night. Sometimes a bike ride to the Baha'i Temple in Wilmette for respite on weekends. That's just a little bit of the foundation. And as you know, I'm not surprised. So many people like us, Paul, love to write because we are not dibbling and dabbling, but we are so influenced by things that other people think don't fit together,
That's
right?
a beautiful way of putting it.
But it's who you
Yeah.
are, right?
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. And I went back and forth on what to say in our little, one page we're given to do our bio in that book. And I wanted to get across what you just said. So I'm glad that I did. That shows I succeeded in it. So, because I didn't want to just say I was this, well, that's not quite true. I was, it's kind of for me, Tracy, it's sort of a blessing and a curse, not a curse in a really curse way, but like it's a challenge. They associate, if you're into astrology, I'm not promoting astrology, but that Gemini association of so many different things. So then it's kind of beautiful, but it's a challenge too.
yeah, I can relate to that. Well, even with deciding to do this show and being in the poetry anthology, I wrote a book a few years ago where it was a book of prayers, but about 20% of them were really poems because I wrote them when I was in a prayerful state, a spiritually grounding state. I was journaling or reflecting or, contemplating on something, and it would come out in a poetic form. So I included it in the prayer book. But there are people who know me in my corporate world of, doing business in corporations, and people see me as very, strategic and business minded and problem solving. And then they find out, wait, you write poetry? Like, yeah. You were a dancer, like you majored in dance and choreography when you were in,
Mm,
and there you can just see their head, go like tilt. And
yeah,
then you're a licensed spiritual coach. Wait a minute, what?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then, the one that people then really go crazy about is, and you roller skate twice a week? Like they can't put me in their box of what a person my age or what a
yeah,
person who does diversity work should do. Or if they know me from poetry and spirituality, how do you do all this work with corporations? It doesn't make sense to them.
yeah, yeah. And did you find our group with that we did with the Poetry Chapel, which I think your viewers have heard about? It sounds like you said that you mentioned it before. Was healing for you in the way that a lot of us got together who are in that similar boat, it felt like. So this book we wrote together was a set of people who have that seeker mentality and not just settling on one thing. That's the kind of group we got together that organically came together. So the community aspect of is so important. And you're doing that here with this podcast in another way, I
Yeah,
think.
building a
Yeah.
community of folks who have these various interests,
Yeah.
and how do they come together?
Yeah.
And for me, it was interesting with the Poetry Chapel group. I don't believe in coincidences.
Right.
And so I think every group kind of has its own thing that mystically brings them together. And I think that happened with our group as well, as you described. But I think, like, whoever's in the next group and the group after that, they're going to be drawn together for ways they didn't even know.
Makes sense.
And
Yeah.
it was validation might be too strong a word, but it was very affirming. Because I can say this to you, I haven't said this to anyone else, not even Shalane or David. But I came in that very first week, and I expected that I would be the only Black person. And I was the only Black person. It would have been fine if I wasn't, but I
Yeah.
wasn't surprised by that. And I was like, our first week, we came in and it was bring a poem you love, not something you've written, but a poem you love. And I had 6 poems I couldn't decide between. But in the 10 seconds before I started reading, I chose a Paul Laurence Dunbar poem that was written in dialect. And when I was reflecting on that later that day, like, why did that one? And it was like, oh, because I have to know from the very first week that this is a group of people where I can show up as a Black person. And that those cultural pieces that help me be who I am, that they're not going to recoil from that, or at least they're going to know from day one that they better buckle up because there's somebody Black in the group. And it was, right? And I didn't consciously think that before I chose it. But, you know, afterwards, I realized that for me was I can't spend 3 months with these folks and then halfway through share something that's culturally important to me or makes me who I am. And they're like, what is she? Who is she? What?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. No, I didn't. I was there that day. I was in that group, and I didn't know until this moment, you know, of a rationale for it. But I remember enjoying. One of my apprehensions of the group was kind of your apprehension in a funny way. Even though I'm white, it would just be a bunch of people I couldn't relate to that were maybe sophisticated. As you know from my poet, I've written a poem called No Dogs Allowed, and I would be like having to be like sort of, yeah, and you like broke that open, and thank you for that. So anyway, yeah.
And that was too, I think, you know, even though we are creatives, right, there still also is that piece of you're interacting with a group of people. And so how are we becoming a group? And how am I going to fit in and yet still bring myself? And I imagine a lot of people, it would be interesting. In fact, yeah, we need to ask some of our colleagues about that. Like, do you remember the first day and what were you thinking and what were you expecting?
Yes. Can I share one of my stories from, I think, maybe the first day and how it's changed for me?
Yes.
I'm not, because for those who don't know, the groups happened on different days. So Tracy and I, some weeks were together and some weeks were not. But in one of the weeks, we were talking about our past, and I had no such thing as coincidence, been going through these boxes from my family, and I found things my mother had saved of my schoolwork from when I was like in 8th grade or something, 7th or 8th grade. And there was a poem in there. So I said, oh my God, I was writing poetry. And so I don't remember writing poetry in some. Did I? I don't know if you were, but then remember this.
I remember the day. I remember and I remember the poem because it was so precious.
So I couldn't even find it now. But you remember what the teacher wrote on it? She wrote what I thought of as a critique. Like, she basically, in my mind, it seems she stopped me from writing poetry for 30 years. Or her and a combination of teachers. She wrote, this is interesting, Paul, but it's an embarrassment of riches. Something like that. Like, you have too many different images in one place, you know, so I decided from that I can't write. Okay, forget writing, do other things. Or something, but I really didn't write much through my life. I'm not blaming this one teacher, but now I want to circle back to that, Tracy, for the learning side of this is it actually, I now that I've tried to do the process with Shaylon and you of writing poetry more seriously, more with more effort and really trying to get a clear, concise message, I see the effort of trimming that is required. So I now understand that she was right. But I just wish she had done it with a little more, that even that isn't a criticism, because she didn't think she was being a teacher. She was showing some truth. She was, so now I forgive her. I see that I probably could have tuned the message in that poem. I wrote better in 7th or 8th grade. And this is all part of the growth process. So I'm glad we can share that first few days and how it happened for us.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, that was a very powerful day because it also made me think about what feedback did I get as a writer?
Yeah, right.
And you know, at which stages of my life, because it feels like I've always written, but really mainly since my teenage years. And it also reminds me, and I hope all of us, that when we are speaking to children, and often when we're speaking to adults, we're actually speaking to the child within them, that
Yeah.
the things we say can have such an impact on them, like either to encourage them or to shut them down, even when we don't intend to.
Yes, because that teacher did not intend to do that. And she wasn't an evil person with a big whip. So yes, but to a child's mind, who knows how it's going to filter in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But luckily, 30 years later, you gave yourself permission to write again, to write more, and you've been writing off and on for a while now. So I'm just curious, is there a favorite poem, a special poem that you would share with the poetry prayer and practices audience?
yeah, sure, absolutely. You're being so generous saying it was only 30 years since I was in 7th grade. Thank you for that. That's but anyway, let's see here now. This is the book. It's not in this book, our wonderful book. I thought when you asked me if I might want to share, you said you kind of warned me about this, and I thought about it and said to myself, well, I think it's important to bring tribute poems to the table because we're saying, Tracy and I have said before that, and in this podcast, poetry is a form of therapy for many people and for both of us, I think, and for people we joke with. And part of therapy is, it's very well understood now, and you'll see a lot about gratitude everywhere. So what is a tribute poem? It's a piece of gratitude you're giving out to the world. And it feels good to you, and it feels good to the person you're giving to, and to those who hear it. So I'm giving a big shout out to gratitude and tribute writing as therapy and poetry. And the one I'm going to read, I have a close spiritual and poetic comrade. Her name is Elizabeth McKim. And I want to acknowledge her as a powerful force in the world. She's an elder stateswoman. She was of poetry and other things. She's been like poet laureate of some university in Switzerland and has some books, and you can Google her last name, McKim. And I've been helping her as she has her giant study filled with documents and old pictures, helping her put together her chronology and anthology of her life with Etheridge Knight, a very important poet in the sort of Harlem Renaissance kind of tradition. Is that a fair way to put it, Tracy? I know you're familiar with that poet.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And that made me want to do my recognition of Eliz McKim. So I wrote this poem. So it's called A True Story. This is a true story. I saw Eliz read a poem in the park, and the trees leaned in to listen. I saw Eliz sing a poem up into the sky, and I swear a bird winked as it flew by. I saw Eliz feature at the cafe, and the ones who paid attention were changed in their heart that day. It's true, I took my guitar to Eliz's house one day, and she started to speak and I started to play, and I swear the mask on the wall smiled, the pipes in the ceiling glowed, and even the floorboards were listening. That's how it goes. When Eliz flows a poem into the river, it keeps its shape as it flows over the rocks and is welcomed into the ocean. You never know what kind of fish it will turn into as it swims away. It's always new. When Eliz reads a poem, and let the people know this is a true story. Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
I love the way you appreciate Tracy. It's beautiful.
Well, yeah, it's like, at least for me. So when I'm listening, right, I'm listening, but then
Playing
it
from Tracy's
has
S21.
to soak in for a minute, and you taking that breath and letting it soak in just those few seconds. Like I can feel the energy of the poem going down my arms and down my legs to the floor. Right. Even when it's a funny poem, it's kind of like I'm laughing, but I'm also letting it take over the energy or the energetic. So I love that you explained before you read it, right? You explained the idea and the importance for you of paying tribute. And to be able to do that in a poetic way is a talent/skill. I don't think it's automatic that everyone can do that. And you did that so beautifully.
I think it's not automatic for me either, Tracy, because if I have that, I knew I wanted to honor Eliz, and it's such a treasure to be able to do it while someone is still here and cognitively aware and able to appreciate it. And we all have our clock ticking on life, and Eliz feels hers and talks about it. And so I wanted, while she can completely hear it, but the thing to your point is I can't just turn it on. I don't think I could write all day for a living, sort of, because to create on demand, I don't even have that skill. So my point is, I think what I do is I set an intention, and then at some morning I'll wake up with it, or someday it will be there, but I don't know what day. That's the way I have, because these things, you said it takes a special talent, but for me, it's a gift that I have to wait for in a way. It's not I can just, I'll write a tribute poem to Tracy right now, and it will be really great. I mean, I wish I could do that in a way, but it's more of a treasure that I can't, that it's sort of a gift that is its own thing,
I think you just answered someone's questions or quelled someone's fears who is watching this, because so often people just dismiss their potential to write poetry.
Yeah. Because they think that it should just sort of come like, and you should just be able to just kind of do it. But it's not something you can just kind of do with a cognitive intention. So At least me, I can't.
Right.
I respect those who seem to be able to, honestly, but I don't think I can. But yeah.
Well, you actually just tied together all three themes that run through this show that in the way that you described, you know, how the writing, especially of tribute poems, happens for you. You set a clear intention, which is really all that prayer is, right? Prayer is saying, this is what I intend to see happen, or this is what I am claiming, right, will manifest in my life. That the prayer is the intention, and that you simmer in that, or you allow it to be, and you're living your life. But that spiritual practice of, you're not trying to force it, you know it's going to happen, it's going to come, and you open and allow it to percolate in your inner thinking. And then the poetry is the effect, or the result, or the outcome, because you wake up and, oh, there it is. There's the seed for it, or there is all of it that then I have to condense. But it's all three of those. And that's, for me, why I wanted to put the three together in one repeating program, because I believe there is that connection between the three, that in a sense, it's all, our life is all spiritual practice.
Yeah.
But we're not conscious of it all the time.
Yeah, the way that you circle back what you see that I did makes me learn. So we're circuiting together, like about the trio, sort of, that creates action, but part of that is just being. I don't know. I'm starting to sort of cycle back on what you're saying in different layers of it, but
well,
yeah.
And then you said the trio, which in my mind was like the Trinity, huh?
Yeah.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or, you know, God, man, being. Like, oh my goodness, in so many ways, the prayer is the Father, the practice is the Son, you know, following in that. And then the poetry is what happens in the mystical, but comes out in something tangible. So I don't know. I'm going to be playing with that. You said trio. My brain was like Trinity. Is there a link?
So, okay, can I go one more step from there?
Yes.
So that made me think about a book I read called The Master and His Emissary, which takes off from the story that I think Nietzsche wrote about a master who keeps telling his emissary all these things to do, and the emissary finally decides, wait, he's telling me everything. I'm doing all the work. I'm going to be the guy, you know, I don't need to need him. So the whole story is about that. But this book claims that it's by a neuroscience guy. The right hemisphere is our holistic, overarching thinking side of us, and the left hemisphere is very much problem solving. And in the Western, we're in an era where the left brain has decided it's the master. And so father and son. So I'm going, it's reversed. So right brain should be more like the father, left brain the son, that I'm just brainstorming with you. And then the holistic action that results when you have that relationship. Okay, there's my circle back. I'm just, boy, people can tell this was not an improvised, this was not a set dialogue you and I are having.
Yeah, well, I often say that what I want people to realize is that it doesn't only feel like you're eavesdropping on a conversation between friends or colleagues. You are eavesdropping because there is no script. We don't do a list of,
Yeah.
these are the questions that Tracy will be asking you. It's like none of that. I want well, I guess even prepared energy is real energy. But I want the candid, right now in real time, what are you thinking and feeling energy whenever possible, because I can't get enough of that in this day where we're so far removed from each other. And there's so many things to fit into our schedule. So if I'm going to talk to people every week, I want it to, be fun and spontaneous. And I only invite people who I know I can do that with.
Oh, that makes me feel privileged and respected. That's what we all want, is we want to be valued, respected, and you're great at giving people that feeling, Tracy. You're in a good spot in what you're doing with the world. I thank you for it.
Thank you. So we've given people a little bit of a snapshot into who Paul Senn is, and I'm so glad you shared the tribute poem. It gives a little taste of you as a poet, although the poems of yours that I have been exposed to run from the deep kind of Christian theology, let's look at that, to the fun and light, no dogs allowed. And so I really want to encourage people to learn more about you. So what's the best way for people to connect with you? And of course, we'll put that where people can link to it.
Thanks, Tracy. Well, I'm not going to hide my identity like I used to. I was like, don't let anyone find me. And now I'm like, everyone find me. So you can find me on Facebook as Paul R. Senn. There's an R there. So that would, I actually did that to throw people off. That's how scared I was of having anyone know who I was. Paul R. Senn. And then my email at psenn@theta-u. Theta is a brainwave frequency. So it's like brainwaveuniversity.io, theta-u.io. And I love hearing from people. I have nothing to hide. Take my identity, please, as the joke goes. So there you go. Thank you so much, Tracy. There's my contact info. I bet the people who listen to this are really interesting people, because that's who you will draw to this thing. Really, people that are searching. That's who I love. So call me, contact me.
Well, I am sure that we may have another conversation later in the year, and I am just right now grateful to be able to spend this time with you. So we'll be in touch again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week, or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/NewThoughtMedia Network. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.